The next market that we all think of course, is the housing market, which is affecting us all.
We're hitting all the good ones right away. This is good.
But we can talk about other things just that are more direct for us that aren't such large purchases, like where we happen to shop and why we shop where we shop and are willing to spend a little bit more. But have you finished talking about how you got involved and so forth?
Not totally.
Okay.
And thanks for re-asking that question. Basically, I was a seller and a leader and a marketer for those companies, NCR, Black & Decker, and DeWalt. And so I experienced how people looked at our products and how they experienced the product, which is part of my definition of a brand. Brand is how people experience your product in a very personal and sometimes emotional way. And it could be different for Maggie than it is for Dan when we're talking about safety and Volvo, for instance.
Yes.
But what I found was people that were good at understanding their company, what their brand meant in the marketplace, didn't know how to articulate it to somebody else, so they couldn't teach anybody else how to do it. So the core premise that I kind of came up with was people, when selling brands, are literally not told how and when to sell a brand and what it means to the person that's buying the brand. So they don't use it as part of their selling weaponry, if you would, or their selling arsenal. And what happened was about 9 years ago, I went out and started my own company after I'd run the training organization at Black & Decker, which served DeWalt. And I started getting involved with various industries. I was doing, 3 customers came to me at one time that were customers in what I call the B2B section of the business, which is business-to-business selling. One was in aviation, one was in hardware, and one was in paint and sundries. And those 3 customers basically were asking me, how do we sell our brand? Can you help us, with your background, learn how to sell our brand better? And so what launched there was workshops, which was in about 2001, which workshop's basically a training event where people come in, you teach them how to talk about their brand, how to approach customers with their brand, what their brand might mean. And then out of those workshops, people were saying to me about 7, 8 years ago, you ought to write something on this. I mean, this just makes so much sense. I should have thought about this 10, 15 years ago.
What hits them the most when you start the workshops and they think, oh, I didn't think of it that way, I didn't approach it that way before? What was different about it?
Well, 2 things were different about it, mainly. Number one, I define a brand as something that differentiates you from the competition, okay? And when it differentiates you from the competition, that means that you've got a leg up on the next person you're competing against. So if you can accentuate that leg up and sell from that posture first, okay? In other words, if I'm selling Volvo, since we've been using that example, the first thing I'd be asking a parent with kids is, do you feel safe when you drive? Have you ever been in a car accident?
So find the way you're different.
Find how you're different.
How you're different, and hopefully it will have an emotional appeal to people that hits one of their basic needs.
That's right. And the second thing that I learned is, as part of the definition of how I look at brands, is that people really have brand pillars that are foundational parts of what their company stands for. Part of the definition is that differentiates you from the competition. Another part of the definition is how customers view and talk about your company. For instance, I know Tom's in the audience, and he's with the Maryland Lottery. The Maryland Lottery, I think, has a great advertising program going on right now that it's creative, it's gives you options, it talks about, it uses a sense of humor, it goes to the emotions of why should I spend $1 to pick up a lottery ticket, you know, in Maryland. Now, people have money that they can spend on cigarettes or Maryland Lottery tickets. So the question is, if you can differentiate your company, which they're obviously doing through their advertising, then you'll get a lion's share or some of that discretionary income that Joe Schmo has walking into a spot where he could buy a ticket. So one of the brand pillars would be challenging to talk to the Maryland Lottery people about actually is, what are you trying to do with that? How does that differentiate you from other sources or places where people can spend discretionary income? And I think that's the challenge that most companies have. They put a great ad campaign program together, then they think it's done. Well, the challenge I gave people in these workshops, well, how do you, Tom, represent Maryland Lottery when you're out on the street talking to people about your company? Because I think that personal impact, one-on-one, just like us right now, is where we really influence people around brands. Harley Davidsons. If you get somebody that loves a Harley Davidson motorcycle, they'll be glad to tell everybody for 15, 20 minutes why they love their Harley. And soon enough, that person is looking at a Harley as the option for a motorcycle. It's that kind of personal touch and almost an aspirational thing. I want to aspire to be with these people. I want to aspire to drive a Harley.
It's built on in relationships and
yeah.
trust.
Yep.